The whispers followed her across the ballroom like a shadow. That's her, the woman who signed away everything without a fight. Eliza Chen held her champagne flute with practiced elegance, her emerald gown catching the light as she ascended the marble staircase toward the VIP section where Maxwell Reed, tech billionaire and the most eligible bachelor in 3 continents, waited with an outstretched hand. If they only knew the truth behind her silence during that divorce, they wouldn't be whispering anymore. They'd be taking notes. If you're enjoying this story of reinvention and secret triumph, please hit that like button and subscribe to catch more tales of unexpected comebacks and hidden strength. Your support helps us bring more stories like Eliza's to life. 3 years earlier, Eliza sat across from her husband of 8 years in their kitchen, the same kitchen where they'd danced after buying their first home, where they'd celebrated promotions and birthdays, where she'd nursed him through pneumonia. Now, David wouldn't meet her eyes as he pushed divorce papers across the granite countertop. "I don't understand," she said, her voice barely audible. "We were talking about starting a family last month." David's jaw tightened. "Things change, Eliza. People change. I've met someone who understands the real me." The real him, apparently being a man who'd been conducting an affair with his administrative assistant for the past year. The assistant who was now pregnant. The assistant who was 24 to Eliza's 35. "I'll make this easy," David continued, his tone businesslike. "The house is in my name. I'll give you 3 months to find somewhere else. You can keep your car and personal belongings. I think that's more than fair considering." "Considering what?" Eliza asked, her hands trembling beneath the table. "Considering you brought nothing into this marriage financially. My career paid for everything." The words stung like salt in an open wound. Yes, David had been the primary breadwinner while she'd put her own career aspirations on hold to support his climb up the corporate ladder. She'd edited his presentations, hosted dinner parties for his clients, relocated 3 times for his promotions. She'd been his unpaid strategist, therapist, and cheerleader. But Eliza didn't argue. She didn't contest. She simply nodded and signed the papers. Her friends were horrified. "You're entitled to half of everything," her best friend May insisted. "At least get a lawyer." But Eliza had a different plan, one that required her complete and immediate freedom. For the past 2 years, while supporting David's career, she'd been quietly developing an algorithm that could predict market fluctuations in emerging economies with unprecedented accuracy. She'd coded late at night while David slept, tested models during his business trips, and refined her work during lunch breaks from her part-time job at the university library. What David didn't know, what no one knew, was that 3 weeks before he asked for the divorce, Eliza had received an email from Maxwell Reed's innovation team. They wanted to meet about her algorithm. They believed it could revolutionize how humanitarian aid was distributed in developing nations, potentially saving millions of lives while creating a new financial model for sustainable development. If she contested the divorce, the proceedings could drag on for months, possibly years. Her work would become part of the marital assets. David, with his connections and resources, could claim partial ownership of her intellectual property. The opportunity with Reed Innovations would vanish. So Eliza made a choice. Freedom now was worth more than justice later. The day after signing the divorce papers, she moved into a tiny studio apartment and took the meeting with Reed Innovations. 2 weeks later, she signed a development contract that included a modest upfront payment and potential equity if the project succeeded. For 18 months, Eliza worked 16-hour days, refining her algorithm, traveling to test sites in Southeast Asia and West Africa. She lived on ramen and determination, pouring everything into her work while David and his new wife moved into a larger home in the suburbs and posted vacation photos from Bali. Then came the breakthrough. During a field test in Rwanda, Eliza's system predicted a regional market shift that allowed a local cooperative to pivot their production, avoiding catastrophic losses during an unexpected drought. The success caught the attention of international development agencies. Within months, Reed Innovations was implementing her system across 12 countries. Maxwell Reed himself requested a meeting. What was scheduled as a 30-minute briefing turned into a 4-hour discussion about global economics, ethical technology, and the future of humanitarian innovation. By the end, he offered her a position as Director of Humanitarian Technologies with a compensation package that made her previous life with David look like poverty. More importantly, he offered her partnership, not just professional but personal respect that recognized her brilliance rather than exploiting it. "Your ex-husband must be kicking himself," Maxwell commented during their third dinner meeting, after the business discussions had evolved into something more personal. Eliza smiled. "He doesn't know. As far as he's concerned, I'm still working at the university library." "You never told him about your success?" "He never asked," she replied simply. "Some people only see what they expect to see." Now, as Eliza took Maxwell's hand at the top of the staircase, she caught sight of David across the ballroom. He was staring, champagne glass frozen halfway to his lips, as recognition dawned on his face. His new wife tugged at his sleeve, clearly wondering why he'd suddenly gone pale. Maxwell followed her gaze. "Is that him?" "Yes," Eliza said, feeling nothing but a distant pity. "That's my past." "Should we say hello?" Maxwell asked, his protective instinct evident. Eliza considered it for a moment, then shook her head. "No need. The best revenge isn't confrontation, it's living well." As they moved toward their table, Eliza felt a weight lift that she hadn't realized she still carried. She hadn't needed to fight for half of what was theirs. Instead, she'd built something entirely her own, something that was changing lives across continents, something that had brought her not just wealth but purpose. The whispers followed her still, but they'd changed tone. "That's Eliza Chen, the woman who developed the predictive aid distribution system. They say she's saved over 1 million lives already." That night, as Maxwell drove her home in his electric sports car, he asked the question she'd been expecting. "Why didn't you ever tell your story publicly? About the divorce, about how he underestimated you? It could inspire so many people." Eliza watched the city lights blur past. "Because my success isn't about him. It never was. The moment I made it about proving him wrong, I'd still be letting him define me." Maxwell nodded slowly. "That's why I love you, you know. Your strength isn't in fighting battles, it's in choosing which ones matter." 6 months later, Eliza launched a foundation that provided technology education for women re-entering the workforce after divorce or career interruptions. She never mentioned her own story in the promotional materials, but word spread anyway. Applications flooded in from women seeking not just education but the quiet strength Eliza embodied. At the foundation's first graduation ceremony, a woman approached Eliza with tears in her eyes. "My husband left me for his secretary after 20 years, she said. "I thought my life was over. Then I heard about you, how you didn't fight, how you just moved forward and built something new. I wanted that dignity. That purpose." The woman handed Eliza a business card. She had started a successful consulting firm after completing the Foundation's program. "Thank you for showing me that the end of a marriage doesn't have to be the end of my story." As Eliza embraced the woman, she caught sight of Maxwell watching from across the room, his eyes filled with pride and love. She realized then that the greatest gift of her journey wasn't the success or the recognition, it was the discovery of her own worth, independent of anyone else's validation. That night, as they walked along the waterfront near their home, Maxwell stopped suddenly and turned to her. "I've been thinking about what you told me, about how you didn't contest the divorce because you valued your freedom more than justice." Eliza nodded, wondering where he was going with this. "I want you to know that I see you, all of you. Your brilliance, your compassion, your strength. And I want to spend my life with you, not as someone who completes you or defines you, but as someone who walks beside you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out not a ring box, as she expected, but a small, worn notebook. This is the journal I started the day we met. Every entry is about something I've learned from you, something that made me better. That's what love should be, not possession or control, but growth. Tears filled Eliza's eyes as she took the journal, more precious than any diamond. Is this a proposal? She asked softly. It's a promise, Maxwell replied. A promise that I will never take your strength for granted or mistake your kindness for weakness. A promise that your dreams will always be as important as mine. Eliza thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago, sitting at that kitchen table, signing away her past to protect her future. She couldn't have imagined then where that signature would lead her. Yes, she said simply. To all of it. Yes. As they continued their walk, Eliza reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She hadn't contested the divorce once, and that single decision, that moment of choosing herself, had changed everything. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from fighting battles, but from having the wisdom to walk away and build something better. Sometimes silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. And sometimes, the person who appears to lose everything is actually the one who gains a world they never imagined possible. The whispers still follow Eliza Chen, but now they carry a different message: there goes a woman who knows her worth. And that, more than any revenge or vindication, is the truest form of justice.